in the OR.
Welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast with your host, Dr. Randy Cook.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast. I'm Dr. Randy Cook, your host for the program, which is produced in cooperation with MD Coaches, a company dedicated to developing and empowering physicians to realize a greater potential and achieve a greater level of satisfaction in their chosen fields. You can find MD Coaches on the web at mymdcoaches.com. Today, I'm very excited to share an interview that I did with Dr. Jerry Mansfield, who is currently the Executive Chief Nursing Officer and Chief Patient Experience Officer for the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston. He is the first person ever to hold this executive-level leadership position for nursing and patient experience in the MUSC system. This makes him responsible for practice of nursing, which includes 3,000 full-time employees, as well as the entire nursing budget, which includes combined revenues and expenses of over $1.2 million. Dr. Mansfield received his nursing diploma from St. Vincent's Hospital School of Nursing in Toledo, Ohio in 1983. He went on to obtain his Bachelor of Science in Nursing at Xavier University of Cincinnati in 1986. Subsequently, he entered the master's program at The Ohio State University in Columbus, where he received his Master of Science in Nursing Administration in 1991. He was named a Robert Woods Johnson Nursing Fellow from 2005 through 2008, and in 2010, he was awarded a PhD in Public Health from The Ohio State University with a dissertation entitled Reports and Ratings of Experiences of Hospitalized Smokers and Non-Smokers in a Tobacco-Free Academic Medical Center. This actually represents only a fraction of Dr. Mansfield's experience and accomplishments. Later on, we'll let you know how to learn more about him on our website. But for now, let's listen to my conversation with Dr. Jerry Mansfield. So, Dr. Jerry Mansfield, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm well, and Jerry, I want to thank you very much for being with us today, and welcome to Prescription for Success.
Truly good to be here.
This is a little bit unique for our program. We represent an organization called MD Coaches, and many of our guests are physicians, and I think most any knowledgeable physician would profess, as I do, that we would have no way to do what we do were it not for our support system, and the basis of that support system is nursing, and that's where you come in, right?
That's correct.
So I'd really like to take you back to the beginning, if you don't mind. We'll do a little reminiscing. You got your diploma degree in nursing in 1983.
That's correct.
That was back at a time when male nurses, I think, were even rarer than they are now. I was looking up some figures on that, and in 1977, the number of male nursing graduates was about 2.7% of the total nurses. By 2011, it was 9.6%. And your class, looking at your class picture, there appeared to be 2 men in the class out of a total of 11. So that would mean that your class was more than double the current percentage of
that was
male
just
nurses.
That picture, though, is of just a small group of friends. There were 6 gentlemen in our class, which quite surprised the Gray Nuns and the and the School of Nursing, because they were usually, used to having 1 or 2.
Right.
And we sort of knocked them off their rocker for a little bit. But the folks in the picture are really the folks that really helped guide my early experiences in my career, and still friends today.
Well, in that same line of questioning, what was it that led you to consider a career in nursing?
I grew up in a very small farming community in Northwest Ohio, and there was no one in my family that was remotely related to anything in the medical profession, and yet I was always intrigued by health-related topics. And so shows on TV that would show hospitals and doctors and nurses working together. I loved those shows. I became ill as a child. Actually, I was a freshman in high school, and I was on my way from the cafeteria up to my afternoon class and passed out on the steps.
Wow.
That's
a good way to get out of class.
Yeah, no kidding. Certainly wasn't my plan, because I loved school, and got to the principal's office, and my mom picked me up eventually, and we went to our family physician, who was about a half an hour away drive. And he said that I had, according to his examination, I was bleeding internally, and my hemoglobin was low, and we should be on our way to the hospital. And I really didn't get a sense of how problematic it was. But when my mother said that she would drive me back home and we would pack a bag and then go, he said, "No, I need you to go now." So I was admitted, and after 5 days at St. Rita's Medical Center in Lima, Ohio, I was scared. They were running tests and procedures. I was on a clear liquid diet. I was doing things and experiencing things that I'd never done in my life. I was in a 4-bed ward.
And this was about what year, approximately?
1974.
Right, just to give people an idea of what the setting would be like, because it's entirely different now. But go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. I was in a 4-bed ward. The youngest patient next to me was about in his early 70s. About the third night I was there, a nurse came into my room. I identified her as a nurse because she had the white shoes and the white polyester dress and a black stripe on her cap. And she did her assessment. And as she was leaving, she turned around and she said, "Are you doing okay?" And I said, "No, I'm not." And she said, "Well, I've got a few other patients to check. When I'm finished, I'll come back and we'll talk." And she did. She came back into the room, and it was, of course, quiet, and it was nighttime, and she had my chart there. So she's holding this big binder of papers, and she allowed me to ask questions, and she would respond based on what she was seeing in the chart. And actually, I was getting better. My hemoglobin was rising. The tests were coming back negative. And I don't know how long she spent with me, Dr. Cook, but I'll tell you, at the end of the conversation, she walked to the door and she said, "If you need anything else, you have your call light." And at that moment, I looked up to the ceiling, in my experience, heaven, and I said, "That's what I want to do. I want to make that difference in other people's lives." So I'll fast forward. Story. I shared that with my family, and they were not overly excited as I was.
I can imagine.
So my early journey was just, I was committed to do this, and I was going to find somehow, some way to get that nursing experience and degree, and I kept pursuing it.
So you enrolled in one of the many parochial Catholic nursing schools that existed back in that day, became an RN, and not long after that, in 1986, you got your BSN. Now, was that because you wanted to be a better nurse, or you wanted better pay, or how did you come to that decision?
Really interesting story. So it's personal, actually. My summer jobs during my education in nursing was at a amusement park in Ohio. It was called Cedar Point. It's still there. And that's where I met my current wife. Of course, we've been married for over 31 years, so it's been pretty current for a long time.
Indeed.
And there were college students there every summer, and I will never forget. We were at a party with some friends, and my future wife said to the group, "Well, you won't even have a college degree," and it never struck me as something I wouldn't have. Right? I was going to be a nurse. And I've found the quickest way to get it through a 3-year program. And at that time, that was my view, even though there were associate degree programs. And so that became my fire to get a bachelor's degree, because I thought I am just as smart as everybody else in this room. And if they think without a college degree I'm not, I'll show them. But I quickly also realized that as I got the bachelor's degree at Xavier in Cincinnati, it really was a program that tried to encourage graduate level education. And as soon as I got the bachelor's, I knew I would pursue a graduate degree soon thereafter.
Well, that was going to lead to my very next question. It was not very long after that that you finished your master's degree.
Yes. And the master's degree, I was toying with the idea of either a master's in healthcare administration, public health, or MBA. And really a colleague encouraged me to get a graduate level degree in the discipline in which I work. It was her perception that's where you really learn the science and the theory behind the practice of nursing. And if you're going to be a leader in nursing, as I intended to be, that foundational information was important. And the experience would help me become, a better discerner of knowledge and disseminator of information. And actually, I chose two minors during that program, both chronic illness and community health, because that was not my clinical experience, because I was an acute care nurse in critical care. So that sort of exposed me to some other ways of delivering healthcare that I was not as aware of, and really sparked my interest for my doctorate.
Well, now that's a very interesting transition story, I think, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. It sounds to me that your original interest in nursing was motivated because of your experience with bedside nursing. And clearly, at this point, you are entering to a phase where you feel like you could function well as a leader. Can you tell me a little bit more about how that decision evolved?
Sure. Leadership was always something I had done in my high school days. I was head of the yearbook and head photographer of the yearbook, president of my class, president of the Honor Society. I sort of had an affinity of leadership. And so I was comfortable in helping groups move things along. But when it came to my first several jobs in nursing, I was always the one volunteering to help, work on a policy or define a clinical practice issue that we could then improve patient care. Or maybe we were having trouble with a department like supplies or respiratory therapy or pharmacy, and could we collaborate with them to make all of our jobs easier? I would always step in and ask to be a part of those solutions. And quickly was encouraged by some folks to, hey, why don't you think about, taking a more formal role? And so I took my first deliberate step when I was working as a staff nurse in Mississippi. I wanted to become an assistant nurse manager. That would have been my first formal role in leadership and nursing. And so I got a copy of the job description of the assistant nurse manager from the Ohio State University, where I had been a staff nurse. And when I read the job description, there were two things that I didn't think I could talk my way out of in an interview. I really had not had the experience. And one was educating other nurses on nursing practice change. And the other was leading interprofessional teams to improve patient care. So during my experience as a staff nurse in Mississippi, I deliberately sought activities that would allow me to have something and experiences that I could talk to in an interview. And perhaps not surprisingly so, when I interviewed at Ohio State for that job, that won the day.
And not long after that, it looks like, as I read your timeline, you were awarded a Robert Woods Johnson Fellowship. Tell me a little bit about how that happened.
Well, this is, you said your audience is mostly physicians, so this has a definite physician angle. I was serving as a chief nursing officer in a community-based hospital, well, community-based but urban, in downtown Columbus that had been acquired by Ohio State University. And the medical director stopped in my office one day and asked if I had ever heard about a Robert Wood Johnson Executive Nurse Fellowship. And I had. I knew of colleagues that had applied. for the fellowship and did not get it, and so I never pursued it. And he said, you really ought to think about it. And I let it go. I said, sure, I'll look into it. And I really didn't. And a year later, a call for applications came up again, and he stopped by and he said, hey, did you ever apply? And I said, no, I didn't. He said, well, do me a favor. He says, I want you to apply. And he said, I will write one of your letters of recommendation. He said, on one condition. I said, oh, okay. He said, you can't read it. I okay. Well, and Dr. Lucas was a wonderful colleague there at this hospital. And so of course I would do that. And I was very fortunate. So they would select 20 nurse leaders from across the United States annually for this 3-year program. And it involved quarterly and then semi-annual meetings in different locations throughout the country. And they sought out leaders in both education, practice, and public health. And it was probably the most extraordinary leadership development immersion I had ever experienced, and influenced me such that I recently transitioned what we had called an alumni association of this nurse fellowship, and have established a 501c3 that is focused on ongoing nursing leadership for others, because the program has since closed from the foundation.
And I suspect that the experience that you had sort of underscored the fact that one of the best ways to achieve excellence is to hang around with excellent people, wouldn't you say?
I completely agree. And I think that there were several aspects of the program that are worth mentioning. So if a physician that's listening to the podcast wonders about, how some programs really help mold that transition, I would say exponentiate a leadership profile. There were 3 things. One was face-to-face interactions on a periodic basis with people who really know how to facilitate a conversation. Really opened up my eyes to how you work with people to work through a problem. And so those face-to-face meetings were extraordinary. And I saw the interrelationships between public health, education, and patient care in a completely different way. So I think since then, I'm much more open to interprofessional collaboration, because I feel that's even going to be a better solution rather the silos we deal with. The other one was a deep self-awareness process. They used a lot of standardized tools to help us learn, our leadership style, how we interact with others, our weaknesses. They were tough on the spots that we needed to work on, and did what they could to improve us in each and every way. And those experiences.
What was that like for you? I'm interested. It seems to me that the significance and the usefulness of self-assessment tools is on the rise, which makes me very happy. But tell me about what the effect on you was. Did you find it intimidating, demoralizing, encouraging? What was it like?
For me, it was encouraging, and it was also a way to, start to. I think label's a wrong word or a bad word, because it that's kind of what we're dealing with sometimes today in our society. But it would help me connect a concept with how I either felt or what I was doing in a leadership setting. So with that concept or that label, and then a little bit deeper dive into it from an evidence-based perspective, then I could begin to develop some internal ahas and or how these things would help. And then I also, through the process, began to appreciate that I'm not going to be perfect in everything, right? I am going to have weaknesses. And so my job then as a leader, as I grow in my career, is that because I can't be all things to all people, then I need teams that help offset where I lack. And I think that was helpful. But I will tell you, Dr. Cook, that there are people who went through the process that a lack of openness to feedback and self-awareness, and really taking it to heart to do something with it, some became paralyzed by it.
I can believe that.
So I think how a person approaches that kind of information is a key part of, is this going to help you grow, or is this going to be a deterrent? And I would see people argue sometimes with the findings, and I just thought, no, this is just important for us to know.
Absolutely. Now, was this concurrently with the beginnings of work on your PhD, or did that come later?
It was all concurrent. So I laugh because it was suggested that I should partition these opportunities. So I had three things going on. I was serving as the chief nursing officer of this urban downtown. I guess urban and downtown are the same words. This downtown,
depends on what kind of town you're talking about.
University affiliated hospital, serving a community that was really in need of a lot of health care. And so full-time job, and a very lean organization, of course. So I had a lot on my plate. In addition to nursing, I was responsible for pharmacy and respiratory therapy and staff development, rehab services. So a lot on my plate. And then I have this fellowship, which was 3 years, that we would meet either quarterly or semi-annually across the country and spend a week together with these people. And it was demanded that you were not connected to your work site during that time, so you could immerse yourself in the learning. And then the third, I was in graduate school for a doctoral degree. And I tried to take 1 or 2 classes a quarter at the time, eventually semesters. And that was a challenge. And they told me in each of the programs that the only way I would get through this and be successful is if I chose projects or work that would influence both where I worked as well as help me work through and get to my dissertation. But of interest, none of those things lined up. So I had to keep plugging away.
Right. So 2010, you finally received the PhD, and I want to hear a little bit about your dissertation. Can you recite the title, or would you like me to do it for you?
I'll let you go ahead, because I'll give you reports and ratings of hospitalized smokers in a tobacco-free environment, I think.
Very good. It's reports and ratings of experiences of hospitalized smokers and non-smokers in a tobacco-free academic medical center.
I'm glad you're reading it.
Perhaps if I had been the person in charge of your title, I might have tried to compress it a little bit, but nonetheless, it tells us where you were headed and what a pertinent topic. And I would really, if you can give us a little bit of a capsulized view, tell us what your research, what you learned from your research while you were working on that project.
Well, what's amazing is, you enter into a doctoral program to learn how to discern unanswered questions. And so my major was health behavior, health promotion in the College of Public Health at Ohio State. My minor was health services management and policy. So your topic had to cross both streets. So on the health behavior, health promotion side, I was so fortunate in the public health program that we had one of the original writers of the production of the clinical practice guidelines for treating nicotine dependence individuals and a federal task force. So Mary Ellen Weavers, who eventually became my dissertation chair. She was a nurse. She was an expert in her field, and that was just so fortunate. So it was all about how do you help people incorporate a behavior change when they're truly addicted to a substance, which I learned it was truly addictive, nicotine. And then on the health services management side, well, then what do you do when you have people? What outcomes are you interested in? Well, at the time, the university wanted to become tobacco-free. So I had this knowledge of nicotine as an addictive substance, and then we're going to restrict tobacco as a statement of health, and aren't we focused on keeping our communities safe and healthy? And yet, we also were doing HCAHPS at the time, so patient experience scores. So my thought was, you take a person who is smoking and you put them in an environment where they can't smoke, and then we're going to ask them how do they feel at the end about their hospitalization. It just felt like it was just not going to work out. So the questions were several fold. One was, would smokers and non-smokers feel differently? And another was, for smokers, did they get any nicotine replacement therapy or any help to quit smoking while they were hospitalized? So 148 pages of dissertation and 48 data tables, a lot of logistic regression. And the findings were all insignificant, except one. If the patient was a smoker, they were more likely to give us a less than 6 rating on the overall rating of the hospital, 0 to 10. And typically today we track the percent of patients that give us a 9 or a 10 on the 0 to 10 scale.
Right.
So my only finding in all the demographics and all the treatment was smokers more likely to give us less than a 6.
Well, I see your point that from a statistical standpoint, that might have been your only significant finding. My take from this, and here I'm just going to volunteer to give you a little encouragement. Having practiced medicine for over 40 years and struggled to get people to give up nicotine because it was making it so difficult to treat whatever illness they had, we are not doing significantly better with that now than we were in 2010 when you were working on your dissertation. And what that tells me is that we just simply have not figured out what the key is. And it's one of those situations, I think, that it's sometimes as important to know what you don't know than it is to know what you know.
I couldn't agree more. And, today, fast forward in my current role, I wear 2 hats, which is executive chief nurse and chief patient experience officer. And so I'm deep into how patients feel about their hospitalization. And so I look back on that dissertation experience. It really was a game changer in terms of how I look at clinical problems and how I try to work with teams. That we can say a lot and we can prescribe a lot, but boy, if we don't help people incorporate this into their lifestyle, it's not going to change. And then it's going to manifest itself in length of stay, readmissions, lack of patient engagement. We'll still have to work at it.
You're quite correct. We got a ways to go. So after landing the PhD, you had actually, before you had your PhD, you already had your first appointment as chief nursing officer. And beyond that, there were a few additional stops. And finally, executive chief nursing officer and chief patient experience officer at the Medical University of South Carolina in charming Charleston. I have to admit, I read that title and I had to ask myself exactly what does this person do? So now is your opportunity to let us all know.
It includes an opportunity to create a new frame of how to both oversee the practice of nursing in a growing academic medical center, really focused on the needs of the entire state of South Carolina to improve health and well-being, and that I could sink my teeth into. That was something I wanted to be a part of. That healthcare is obviously beyond just the specialty and the subspecialty side, and this organization for me seemed to be a place that saw that future. So I'm accountable for anything a nurse does, a licensed registered nurse in the state, of what he or she does in their clinical setting. Ultimately accountable for them practicing to the top of their license and or making sure they don't overstep in terms of their clinical care. So that's one aspect of my work. And then the other is setting a strategic direction for patient experience at MUSC Health. And I've been fortunate. We survey a lot of people in a lot of areas, so we collect a tremendous amount of data. And then our job is to look at that information and to discern how do we really begin to engage patients and families in their healthcare journey. Because I think that's really where we need to go, not just focus on the metrics that are in the CAPS surveys, whether it's outpatient or inpatient. It's really about, are they engaged in their healthcare journey with us? And then developing a sense of mutual loyalty that they're going to be a continued customer, not only today with their acute or chronic problem, but over their lifespan. And so a way for future sustainability in terms of volume in our clinics and outpatient areas, as well as inpatient.
That's very insightful. And I have to say, just because of your obvious understanding of that need, that Medical University of South Carolina is very fortunate that you are there.
Oh, that's very kind of you to say. It's a work in progress. I've been here 3 years in August, but it's an extraordinary system. I'm just in awe of the clinical team, the kind of care we provide. It's everything from, children's and women's to a variety of excellent service lines, and as well as an extraordinary telehealth presence throughout the state, and really connected to try to reach healthcare in rural areas in a state that's pretty ill. We're number 44 out of 50, so the sky's the limit. I think this is a system to help us do it better.
Well, I know that must be a rewarding experience for you. And as I say, it sounds like they have the right person there to help them get the job done.
It is my evaluation time. I might want you to make a phone call to our CEO just to put that little bug in his ear.
I'll send you my number.
All right.
So let's move on to maybe a little bit more obscure subject. You have made a number of references to qualities of leadership, and I wonder if you'd be willing to take a stab at telling me what exactly do you think defines a leader, if anything?
Well, I think we throw the topic of leadership around a lot, and you can't be on any LinkedIn site or search the internet, and I mean the airport books are full of it. But I think there's an element of leadership that it truly is an evolving characteristic. And if you look back way into the early years, there have been profiles of leadership over time. Some we admire, some we may not admire as much. But what they did was they motivated people to do something, or led people into places that they had not yet known they could go. And so early on, I think one of the characteristics for me that's been helpful is I really became a student of leadership. So I would watch people and I would read things, and I'm a constant observer in both my own industry as well as outside of my industry. Is what are the things that people do and say and how they act that gets groups to do something better, different, really influence, for me, patient care and outcomes, and engage teams in this difficult time of healthcare transformation. And so this concept, I think, of student of leadership is something I would like more people to think about. So for me, it's not just a title, and it's not just a set of formal or informal education, or you just happen to read a leadership article from Harvard Business Review, or you saw a movie on it. You gotta start to live it every single day. And I think the more people on a team that are interested in that as a how is this helping me grow in my effectiveness, those are great experiences to have when you're on an active leadership journey with other people. I think that's one. And then another one is really open to feedback. I can't tell you how much I have discerned over time that, we get feedback all the time. But I find that there are some individuals that are more open than others to what people are trying to tell them. And it's certainly been my experience that when I have heard something and then I've heard it again, or it's come, a similar concept from a couple different angles, it's important for me to look at that. And yet I see people in leadership roles that are getting that kind of feedback and either ignore it or argue themselves out of it. And I think over time, that defines their style. And then all of a sudden they find themselves either effective or ineffective because of it.
So it sounds like, as to the question of whether leaders are born rather than made, that your take on it is it depends.
Right.
And we'll Go ahead and tell us what it depends on.
Well, I think some people have, because of their social network, their socioeconomic status, where they grew up and live, and the experiences they have with the families and friends that they associate with themselves. Some people might be more influenced by a leadership track and do that early on. Yet, I don't think that there's any science that would suggest that anybody who doesn't have any of that can't be a leader. It just might be a little more challenging or difficult, but I think more importantly, it's do you want to have a positive impact on the product or the group in which you are working within and or trying to serve? And if you want to influence that in a positive way, then that's something you're going to have to work at. It doesn't come with just, as I mentioned, either the credential or the title that puts you in that spot. And then it's interesting as you see this evolve over time, the styles of leadership kind of come and go based on who's popular at the time. But I think more and more we're learning that there are a certain set of characteristics that propel people forward faster. And so authors like Peter Drucker is an extraordinary person to follow. And in fact, with the foundation that I was in, the Executive Nurse Fellows, Robert Wood Johnson as a executive leader in a very large successful company had some extraordinary leadership lessons for us to pay attention to. And then one of my favorite books on leadership, which was actually I was encouraged to read, and it's incredible. Doris Kearns Goodwin wrote about Abraham Lincoln's presidency in a book called Team of Rivals. And I would suggest that if you've not read it and you have a lot of time on your hands, it's not a small read, but it's extraordinary to read the wisdom that Lincoln had in assembling a cabinet for his presidency when it was about, slavery and the Civil War. And he surrounded himself with gentlemen that not only ran against him in the presidential election, but didn't like one another either. And how he felt that it was that level of integration and collaboration, as difficult as it was the only way the country was going to get through that very difficult situation. And I will tell you what I think that means in today's healthcare environment is that we all work with people that are not always on the same page as us, and sometimes can be quite cantankerous. But sometimes I approach those situations, if those things are getting surfaced in a meeting, then we might have an opportunity, if we work through it together, to come up with an even better solution. So for me, reading a book like about Abraham Lincoln helps me keep in perspective when opinions different than mine are being surfaced, that I have to open myself up to that feedback versus shut it down because it's something different than what I think.
Those are really some superb thoughts, and I'm thinking about seeing if I can have what you just said read into the congressional record in Washington. Clearly, they're having a hard time getting along. Well, Dr. Jerry Mansfield, we have arrived at the point in our program that I really enjoy the most, and that is when we ask our guests to share what they consider to be keys to successfulness. So I'm going to sit back and listen, and I'm going to invite you to give us your personal prescription for success.
I think overall, when I look at a couple things I want to say, it's really a matter of there's a sense of humility about it. Working with people today isn't easy, and there's so much information, there's so much to discern, and there are so many competing interests and issues. It's overwhelming sometimes. So I think the first thing a person needs to do is really develop a pattern for self-awareness and deep reflection. Some people may do that through sports or activities. Some may do it through journaling. Some may do it through hobbies, interactions with family, etc. But you've got to make time for yourself to step back. I describe it as a 30,000-foot view. Go up over what you're dealing with and look at what's happening and ask yourself, how are you either helping or hindering the situation? And you also can't do this on your own. It requires some self-reflection and self-work, but in the end, you reach out for help. You have access to assessment tools that give you insight into how you look at information and things and what your values are. So you know kind of where your center is and then what you're going to do. And then I'd encourage people to find a mentor in that self-awareness process. So bounce things off of a trusted colleague or a few, or maybe even the spouse of this is what I'm thinking. How do you see that? And I will tell you, I think one of my greatest leadership coaches is my wife, Jane. The second is access ongoing learning. So I mentioned earlier, become a student of leadership every day. That may be done formally or informally. There are several daily emails I get from a couple of resources that I find helpful. I don't own anything in these companies. I don't have anything to gain by promoting them, but I'll mention one, Mindful Leadership. There's another one, a Leadership Nudge, Nudge. Another is from information I get from Center for Creative Leadership. Some you have to pay for, some just come naturally, or free over the internet. But those daily nuggets sort of help me just sort of pause and step back. And what's amazing is I usually find something I'm dealing with at the present time, or something I anticipate is coming for me to deal with. I pull out certain things from these leadership inoculations on a daily basis to help me step back and then help me take it forward. And the last I'll mention, I really try to approach each challenge that I'm in, that I've got something to learn or discern about it. So what I mean by that is that every problem presents itself with a variety of conflicting opportunities. And as I might be charged to help handle that situation, it's one of two things are going to happen. And it could be I'm here to discern what I am supposed to do with a group of people to help move the problem along to a potential solution, or I'm here to learn something about my leadership, myself, because we don't do things right all the time, and we make mistakes, and we might stumble. So in that, if sometimes the decision takes us in a direction and it didn't have the intended effect, well, then I have to step back and admit to the team that, hey, I might have made the wrong choice there, and let's talk about that. So I try to work with others and drive toward action, looking for the things in which we can measure that what we're doing is having the intended outcome. So I spend a lot of time just within each situation learning and discerning what the next step will be. So those are pretty broad, but those were the ones that come to mind and repeat themselves in my leadership life that I think are worth mentioning for your listeners.
Well, I think that's very good advice and really thoughtful guidance that you have offered for us. You talked about self-reflection. You talked about including others in your efforts. You talked about continued learning, and perhaps most of all, to look for opportunities everywhere, even among the challenges. And very wise of you to identify those types of opportunities, and you have put them into very digestible words, and we appreciate it. So, Dr. Jerry Mansfield, that will bring us to the end of our time together. But before we go, I want to say, first of all, again, how much I appreciate you being here. And I would also like to give you an opportunity to let the listening audience know how they can follow you, if you have email address, website, blogs, any kind of social media presence that you would like to make available to us.
Absolutely. So happy to continue the conversation with anyone. I have a LinkedIn profile. It's not one of the private ones, so it's open to anybody. So I think it's listed as Jerry A. Mansfield. And so please feel free to reach out. And of course, we can message, which might be a little more private, but happy to talk to anybody about any topic that we've already discussed or maybe something that I'd like to explore in the future. In addition, my work email address is M as in Mary, A, N as in Nancy, SFIJE at musc.edu. And feel free to email, and would love to also continue to network with folks that are on a leadership journey just like I am. And I'd also like to take the opportunity to say thank you to my physician colleagues. We, as I mentioned, work in a very transformational time in healthcare, and all of us are learning each and every day. But I do know that one day I might be in a bed or a treatment table, and one of you will be looking me in the eye, and I will have hoped that the interactions that we either have had or will continue to have will be the ones that we would want to deliver to any family or friend that we care about ourselves.
Well, once again, Jerry Mansfield, thank you very much for being here. You've been a charming guest, and we appreciate having you here.
Thank you, sir.
And that brings another Successful Prescription for Success podcast to a close. You can subscribe to our show and glean more insight about my guests by reviewing the show notes on our website at rxforsuccesspodcast.com. That's RXFOR, rxforsuccesspodcast.com. We'd love it if you would leave a comment or a question. I'll be reading those on the air from time to time. And finally, if you'd like to help support the show and gain access to members-only content, you can become a patron by visiting the Patreon website at patreon.com/RX for Success podcast. That's patreon.com/RX for Success podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and do please join me next time for another Prescription for Success.